Okay. All right. Good. All right. We're good. Well, hello, I'm Charlie Baston. I'm a board member here with the Appalachia Audubon Society. And tonight it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Chris Werner. Now, Dr. Werner is an explorer, researcher, and filmmaker. He has served as the science director for the Woodville Karst Plain Project since 1999. He has explored underwater caves and conducted scientific hydrogeologic research in the Woodville Karst Plain for the past 25 years or more. Dr. Werner has a Ph.D. in geophysical fluid dynamics and a Master of Science in Geology from FSU, and a BS in Earth and Planetary Science from the University of Pittsburgh. Now, this program tonight is really special to me. As a former park ranger at Wakulla Springs State Park, I can attest, firsthand experience of the incredible work the WKPP group has performed at Wakulla Springs. It's just been remarkable what they have accomplished there. As most of you know, Wakulla Springs is one of the largest and deepest freshwater springs in the world. And WKPP to date has physically mapped and explored over 40 miles of the cave system associated with Wakulla Springs. Now, just stating a little Dr. Werner's thunder, he said if this was above ground, this would be probably one of the premier national parks, not only in the United States, but possibly the world. So that's just how incredible natural resource we have in our own backyard. So with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Chris Werner.
Make sure everybody can hear.
Let's try that.
How's that? Can everybody hear me? Yeah, sounds pretty good. Online as well. Little louder. Okay, I can raise my voice a little bit. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Charlie, for that warm welcome. I want to start out by thanking everybody for their interest in the underwater caves. As Charlie said, this is a very, very unique place. I know not everybody can visit it. Yeah, believe me, we feel very grateful that we're able to visit such a unique place. So I'm going to show you some pictures of what we've got tonight. This picture is of Emerald Sink, which is in the Wakulla State Park. And if you were diving there and were underground at 20 feet, you would see what we see here when it's clear. It's not clear right now, but this is what it looks like from below at about 20 feet. Yeah, which way? Be down here. I use the buttons. All right. Okay. So I'm going to start out giving you a bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about for roughly the next hour. I want to start by reminding you of what makes a good story. Right? We're going to talk about what the Woodville Karst Plain Project is, what our mission is, who we work with, what we do. We're also going to talk about our most recent connection into Wakulla Cave that we made early last year, and that was from Chip's Hole. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the underwater cave connections that have been made over the past 40 plus years. And we're going to talk about the importance of springs through time, and how that has changed as changes in the ecology, changes in the environment, changes in the water clarity and water quantity, and how that has affected things that we've seen in our own personal lifetimes, right? We're going to talk a lot about some science and the interconnectedness of these underwater caves. And when I talk about interconnectedness, I want you guys to think about a circulatory system, right? Just like your blood feeds all the organs in your body, yeah, the underwater caves of this area feed water to every ecosystem. It all comes from this aquifer. Originally comes from precipitation, but it goes into the aquifer and it feeds everything. So while you guys want to go look at birds or wildlife or other things, other people want to go hunt, they want to fish, they want to enjoy the outdoor spaces, the trees, the natural environment. It's all fed by the water. We're going to talk about a little bit of things we're focused on as far as exploration and research that we've got going on. And then we're going to talk about a good story coming together here at the end. Okay. This is part of the upper limit of the system. This is from Sullivan Sink. You can see how beautiful the water looks there. It's nice and clear up there. So what makes a good story? What are those elements? I'll remind you back to your English literature days. The first one is a premise, a setup of a location, a cast of characters, some circumstances that we find ourselves in. Yeah? Think back to the stories that you enjoy, that you've read, or movies that you've seen, right? They've all got this in common. The other thing they've got in common is a plot, right? A series of events that comes together from some type of inciting incident to a climax near the end, and some type of resolution. Yeah. Characters. Who are the people that move that story along? You got some main characters, you got some ancillary characters, some supporting characters. Yeah. And then how is that story told? Right? How do we, right? Sometimes it'll be first person. I did this, I saw that, I went there. Yeah, or a third person, or somebody narrating. What is the perspective that that story comes from? Yeah. And finally, the themes. How do we relate that story to things that are larger than the story itself, that are greater for the reader? I want you to think about all these things as you listen to the presentation, because I think you'll find as we cover this story that all of these elements are here. But most of you don't know this story. You may know pieces or parts of it. You may know the things that touch you, but there's a much, much larger story here waiting to be discovered. All right, so what is the WKPP? This is Shepherd Spring, far back about 6,000 feet from the entrance, place called Coldwater Canyon. The Woodville Karst Plain Project was originally formed by 4 members: Parker Turner, Bill Gavin, Bill Main, and Lamar English. Today, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our mission is to explore the underwater caves of the area, survey them, map them, document them in different ways, and then is to reach out to people like yourselves and educate you on what we found and what we've discovered, right? And we also do quite a bit of research support. So various researchers, either from state or federal agencies, academic researchers, we're here to assist them. We're approximately 75 team members strong, and everybody's a volunteer. Yeah. We partner with researchers and agencies, resource managers. You can think about the Park Service, the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife. And we also partner with private landowners, somebody that is just concerned about maybe a sinkhole they've got on their property. Yeah, and we work with a lot of other groups, a lot of other citizens groups. So we've got special use permits for diving activities, obviously at Wakulla Springs, at various places with the Florida Fish and Wildlife, the National Forest Service, St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Over that 30-plus years, since 19, we've logged over 8,500 dives, more than 400,000 hours underwater, and it continues to climb every year. We've been working to progress conservation efforts to preserve and protect these vital natural resources for future generations. This really began back with the Springs Initiative movement that had started around 1999, 2000 area, to provide maps so that some of the officials at DEP and Florida government could move to acquire those lands to preserve them for the future. We worked with at Natural Bridge and the Rakestraw Tract that is now a state park. We worked as well on the Feral Tract, which was a new addition several years ago to the Wakulla Forest. And most recently, we worked with the Florida Conservancy to be able to go ahead and get Chips Hole, the latest connection that we've made to the Wakulla Cave. And we're happy to announce that a few weeks ago, they put out a memorandum that the state is going to provide that funding to buy that land from St. Joe and move that 16 gas station from above the cave. Okay, so we've also been recognized for our work, especially when we made the Leon Sinks to Wakulla Cave connection back in 2009, so the Florida Governor's Cabinet. And we also got a Florida House of Representatives resolution, HR 9053 in 2011, that indicated that we had done a good job for the citizens of the state of Florida. This is another shot, a little bit deeper in Emerald Sink. Quick video. This video is from Casey and I had the privilege earlier this year to speak to a subcommittee of the Florida House of Representatives, and we gave them this short video as part of an introduction. I wanted to share that with you guys now. That one on the left. There you go. And there's a way to put it in like big mode, like full screen. Go to view, I think, and then full screen.
Woodville Karst Plain Project, WKP, is named for the Woodville Karst Plain located south Tallahassee in Leland, Jefferson, and McCullough counties. The massive limestone plain, covered by a relatively thin layer of sand, contains numerous sinkholes, karst windows, sinking streams, and large artesian springs where extensive underwater caves transport large volumes of water through the aquifer. The largest and deepest of these underwater caves is the McCullough Cave System, with 30 entrances and mapped nearly 45 miles long. Exploration of the McCullough Cave System began more than 70 years ago and continues today as advances in diving equipment technology allow explorers to push further than previously imagined. Leading the exploration effort for the past 33 years are the divers of the Woodville Karst Plain Project, the most accomplished underwater cave exploration project in the world. The mission of the nonprofit 501c3 scientific research organization is to 1, explore, survey, and map the underwater caves of the area. 2, to provide accurate and reliable cave surveys to federal, state, and local agencies. And 3, to help facilitate aid scientists, researchers, and resource managers in collecting and interpreting information from this unique underwater environment. All data collected by WKP is provided at no cost, with the understanding that better data allows for more informed decision-making and better resource management. The McCullough Cave, the longest underwater cave in the United States and the 5th longest in the world, runs from the Leland Saints geological area of the Appalachian National Forest southwest to McCullough Springs State Park and points south towards the Gulf of Mexico. In close proximity to the McCullough Cave are numerous smaller cave systems that explorers have pursued in hopes of one day connecting to the system. On January 7, 2023, after more than 10 years of focused effort, WKP divers connected the Chips Hole Cave to McCullough Cave. This accomplishment represents a long history of underwater connections by cave divers, establishing the geographic extent of McCullough Cave. Currently, there are no scientific or engineering technologies to determine where underwater caves and caverns are located on the subsurface. Ground penetrating radar, seismic imaging, microgravity, and magnetic surveys cannot resolve the location of underwater caves. The only viable way to provide accurate underwater locations is by physical human exploration. The divers of the Woodville Karst Plain Project, volunteers contributing their time, effort, and expertise, tirelessly explore the extent of the underwater caves of the area. In recent years, research endeavors, which include geophysical, indicate that the McCullough Cave System will continue to grow with connections that will one day undoubtedly establish the physical link south to the Gulf of Mexico. Future success exploring these remote environments will require deep experience, resolve, rigorous adherence to standard operating procedures, and strong partnerships among all stakeholders. Doing so will ensure these unique and irreplaceable resources, including the water flowing within, are protected and preserved for future generations.
All right, I hope you guys liked that short little video. Gave you a sense for how big the system is, where it runs from, where it's headed to. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Noel. All right, so let's talk about that connection. This is from upstream Sullivan, a place called the Weird Room. Yeah, so that connection was big. Wakulla Cave at the time was about 38 miles long, and Chips Hole we had explored to about 7 miles long. And now with that entrance, we've got 30 mapped entrances to Wakulla Cave. And now we're approaching 45 miles in total underground length. And we confirmed that by this thing we've got, you saw it in the video, that thing that was sitting on the rocks and it looked like a big coil. Well, that's a coil of copper wire that we induce a magnetic field, electromagnetic field through with a battery pack. And I want to tell you that connection point was somewhere that was just absolutely pristine. But in fact, it happened right there in Greenlee Acres, which was a trailer park. So Chips Hole in green, the Wakulla Cave was in red, and that was the connection point that the divers made that connection in. And there you can see it on the bottom right in front of somebody's trailer in their driveway. That's where the connection point on the surface looks like, but you wouldn't know it. Yeah. So there's the cave radio locator, and there's Steve on the surface. You know, we use another coil on the surface to be able to find that. And you've also got the picture on the bottom left is actually Turner Sink, which probably isn't that attractive as well. Just looks like a small pond out in the woods. But this connection took a really long time because it was not where we thought it was going to be. All the big passages had been explored, but they all terminated in these rooms, these large galleries, and we couldn't find our way on. And so we had to employ different methods. So we basically said we're going to use the science. And we conducted a dye trace between the downstream part of Chips Hole, where this water was flowing into this small hole that we didn't think we could pass. And we looked for it on the Turner side in multiple locations, 15 different places. And we found it in 2. So we had narrowed down where it was coming in, and the guys went in there, and the passages were really, really small. So we had to change our equipment configuration from the normal tanks that we were on our back to a side mount configuration. And then the exploration kept going, and it was further and further away, and they couldn't drag so many tanks with them on regular open circuit scuba. And so we had to then do side mount with a rebreather to be able to make that connection successfully. So 10 years is a long time to be working at something. But it came to fruition, and we're pretty excited about it. And you guys should be too, because there's not going to be now a gas station on top of the cave that was originally planned. Yeah. So that's one side of our story, right? The other side is all the other people, many of them in this room, who went out to kind of protest this thing and raise consciousness about it. This is that small entrance where we found the dye coming out of. And those are the 2 guys from our team, Blake Wilson on the left and Steve Cox on the right, who actually made the connection. You can see they're in side mount, no tanks on their back. And if you notice, they've got a rebreather tucked up under their left arm there. So 10 years, long time, a lot of effort, a lot of work went into that. So that was a real show of perseverance, getting that done. Okay, this is another great shot of upstream Sullivan and some of the really, really big rooms that we call it. So let's talk about a little bit of the history of the cave exploration and some of those connections, because many of you probably don't know that this goes back to the 1950s. Yeah? Anybody heard of Wally Jenkins or Gary Saltzman? Okay, somebody has. These guys were students at FSU, right? And they were diving places around here, some of the sinkholes. They were diving over at Natural Bridge every once in a while. But those guys, there was a movie being shot at Wakulla, and those guys, and the movie set's compressor broke down for their divers. And they said, well, you can use our compressor if we can dive. And that's what they did. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, those guys did 100+ dives, and they recovered some of the first mastodons from down deep in the basin at the entrance of the cave, at about 180 to 250 feet deep, right? So the mastodon that you see down in Gainesville, University of Florida, at the Natural History Museum, some of the dugongs and some of the other fossil remains were originally discovered by those guys. So they started this whole thing back in the 50s. Then you had guys like Bob Goodman and Kirby Sullivan and Tex Chalkley from the 1970s. And they made several connections, you know, lower river to upper river sink. You had guys like Sheck Exley and Court Smith and Paul DeLoach and John Zumrick in the 70s and 80s that connected a lot of things, from Clear Cut to Promise, Emerald to Cheryl, and some of these other surface locations along that river sinks track. You had Bill Stone and his United States Deep Caving team ran the Wakulla project back in 1987 that basically did an extensive first exploration of Wakulla itself. They found 4 different passages, A tunnel through D tunnel, and just, you know, lots of good here about how to deal with how deep that cave is at almost 300 feet deep. So that's where the introduction of helium mixtures instead of breathing air, because air is narcotic at depth, came from. A lot of that had started around that time, and then you had the founders of the WKPP in the 1980s, who ended up doing the Sullivan to Cheryl connection. So that was the forest. You know, Sullivan's in the Apalachicola National Forest all the way to Emerald, which was on the, at the time, St. Joe land, which is now part of Wakulla State Park. And then guys in the 90s, George Irvin, Casey McKinley, Jared Jablonski, Steve Irving, Brent Scarabin, Rick Sankey, John Rose, myself, really started doing a lot of exploration around the area. We pushed Wakulla out several miles, had done the Big Dismal. You've gone to the Leon Sinks geologic area. You know Big Dismal. We connected that to Emerald Sink. That was 1996. We did the connection from the St. Mark's River Rise all the way up to Natural Bridge Sink, and the 15 different sinkholes along there. We had Bill Stone come back for his Wakulla 2 project in the late 90s, where he ran the mapper and got some of the first 3D images of the inside of that cave. And then in the 2000s on, it was really the Turner Sink to Wakulla connection, which connected the entirety of Leon Sinks to Wakulla back in 2007, and our most recent connection of Turner Sink to Chips Hole. So big history here that you guys probably aren't aware of. Yeah, but it's been a huge effort by cave divers throughout several generations. And proud to say that hopefully this continues in the future. So we're thinking about our good story. Let's talk about the importance of some of the springs. Yeah, this is in the Wakulla Basin. Good shot here of Casey with one of our new technologies. So we know from the archaeological work that's been done in the area, both at Wakulla Springs and also over along the Osceola River at the Page Latson site, that there were humans here 16,000 years ago, and they were hunting mastodons. And we've got evidence of that. Yeah, spear points and cutters and scrapers. We've got mastodon bones with, you know, projectile points in them. In that bottom picture, that's one of the original. It's probably Gary Saltzman there, checking out the jawbone of a mastodon. But we also use these springs for entertainment. You see that picture on the right, that's from Airport 77. If you haven't ever watched that movie, it's good. I watched it when I was a kid. Pretty exciting. It was filmed at Wakulla. If you take the riverboat tour, glass bottom boat tour, you can see some of the mastodon bones right there in the basin. Yeah. And as well, you know, people in the, I think this is the 1950s, probably the mid 1950s, on a jungle cruise at Wakulla. Quite important. Yeah. Form of entertainment. I think they were there for a conference. I see some name tags. And, you know, just from maybe a year or two ago at Wakulla, the attire changed a little bit, but people are still there enjoying themselves, recreating. Yeah. But we've seen a big difference at Wakulla from back in the day. People that would visit in the 50s and 60s would always talk about it being clear. But now it looks more like this. It's green, right? A lot of people have worked and researched why is it green? Well, there are several different reasons, right? And we found that out through concerted effort at the Springs Initiative, between researchers, hydrologists, botanists, ecologists. There's high nitrates in the water, right? We were trying to figure out where's this coming from, because what was happening was the ecology was changing. Yeah. So now we're seeing it on the surface. We had invasive plants. Who remembers the hydrilla that was at Wakulla? You know, back in the late 90s and early 2000s. You couldn't even swim. It was everywhere. It was all over the place. It had choked the entirety of the river. Manatees could not swim up to the spring anymore because there was hydrilla all through the river. We also had outbreaks of algae because of the high nitrates in the water. So there's a concerted effort by scientists to figure out, where's this coming from? Some people had theories, but we needed to prove it. Yeah. And so we've seen that, you know, look at the blue line. That's the number of glass bottom boat tour days over the past 30 years, right? We've seen that, you know, we were averaging somewhere between 150 and 200 days a year for the better part of the early 90s. And then we saw that gradually drop off. Some of that is due to excessive rain, but there's something else going on, right? I mean, now those glass bottom boats hardly ever run. You get lucky if you can get, you know, a few days per year, when we used to be running 30 years ago, almost 150 to 200 days per year. Okay, so just in our lifetimes, we've seen those changes. Yeah, think about your elements of the story. Yeah, let's talk about some of that science that's gone on. Lots of smart people at the Water Management District, lots of smart people at the Florida Geologic Survey, lots of smart people at the DEP working together to kind of figure out what's going on. So we've got rivers, we've got springs, we've got sinkholes, and then we've also got these crazy cave divers who have been surveying and mapping underwater caves. Well, they're all somewhat connected, right? We see all those green dots, those are sinkholes, right? The little stars are the springs. These are natural springs in our area, in southern Leon and Wakulla County, right? They feed two of the biggest rivers we've got in the area, the St. Marks River and the Wakulla River. Yeah? Connected to those are quite a few caves that we've explored. And a lot of these caves, you can get into them via these sinkholes. Look how many more sinkholes there are than caves that we've mapped. Yeah? A lot more cave out there to explore and map. We've also got these things called swallets. What's a swallet, you say? Well, it's where a surface stream runs and then dives underground. Okay? Up north, we would call them sinking streams because they sink right into the ground. Yeah? And look at those. And then look what's connected to those. A whole nother tributary of these large surface springs. Right? So one of the things we did, putting all those smart people together and getting some consultants and some others that were experts in what we call karst hydrology, we did a whole bunch of dye tracing, right? And that dye tracing started to show us, hey, a lot of these things that we thought were connected actually are connected. We got the dye from one place, would put it in these swallets or these holes, and it'd come up in nearby caves. It would come up at Wakulla Springs, right? So let me just give you guys a quick little, I can get this to work. Which one is it? It's not going. Is it off? That's why. All right. Okay. So some of the first dye traces we did were from this little stream here, Fisher Creek, runs straight into here, and we got that at Emerald Sink. There's another little creek here. It runs every once in a while. It's a perennial, right? So only during large rainstorms. It sinks there at Black Hole, and that comes out at Emerald Sink. Anybody know what this is? This is the bottom end of Munson Slough from Lake Munson that sits up here, goes across the road, heads south. There's two sinks, 2 or 3 sinks down here, Ames Sink and Kelly Sink. When we put dye in there, we got it at Indian, and we also got it at Wakulla, right? Before this was connected, where we didn't know where the connection was, we put dye in at Turner Sink, and we got it at Wakulla, right? Trying to make sure we know where the water's going. Then, who knows what's up off Tram Road? The spray field, right? So all the wastewater that we've got from your toilet, from your shower, from whatnot in the city of Tallahassee goes out to the airport, gets, processed and gets piped along Capitol Circle over to this spray field and sprayed onto the ground. Yeah? That water that's been put on there, we put it in wells. There's a sinking stream up there from a little pond called Turf Pond. Guess where that dye went when we put it in there? It went to Wakulla Springs. Yeah? You guys getting the interconnectedness? Yeah? Nobody at the city of Tallahassee didn't want to believe it. We had to repeat it for them to do that, for them to believe it. Then there was no turning back, right? Now they had to deal with it. I mean, credit to city of Tallahassee for stepping up and upgrading that. I mean, it took a lawsuit to do it, but they did it. They did it. This comes off the forest. It's a creek called Lost Creek, and it sinks in this very violent sinkhole. We put dye in there, and we got it coming out at Spring Creek. We also got it in this little cave here called Punch Bowl. We repeated it at different hydrologic conditions. What does that mean? Means when the water table is higher after a lot of rain. Yeah? Different hydrologic regime. It also came out at Spring Creek, but then we got some of it went to Wakulla. Okay? So when I say interconnected, when I talked about circulatory system, yeah, that water's going everywhere. Okay? That water feeds the habitats that you guys enjoy, right? You want to go kayaking, you want to go canoeing, you want to get on your boat, go out to the coast, do some fishing, you want to go watch some birds, take some photos. All of that is fed by the water, okay? You got to protect the water. We've got to protect the water where it goes underground as well, because we know where it's going to, right? So it's the scientists, another character in our story, yeah, science coming together to show us, hey, you know, this stuff is connected, and it's affecting our environment. It's affecting some of the things that we see. Okay, let's talk about what we're doing most recently. Oh. Okay. So one place we've been is where that little green box is Shepherd Spring. We've been in there a few times, pushed that exploration for a while, but then found a new lead and put in another mile or so. We were just there a couple months ago, and unfortunately, the way on has been blocked and it's much too small for us to get through. But we'll think about going back down there at some time soon and see if we can run that north, because we're almost to US 98, and it's not clear where the water that's emanating out of that spring is. And if anybody's been down to the refuge and taken that hike, it's one of the most pristine springs we've got in the area. So I would highly encourage you to go down there. Beware of the gators. They're small gators down there, not big ones. Yeah, and bring your bug spray at this time of the year. Yeah, another place we're interested in is Spring Creek, but the ability for us to get in there is really limited. Not only by visibility, but we've got tidal influences, freshwater, saltwater lens. The turbidity is usually high. So, and the flow at low tide is such that there's no possible way for us to get in. So we have to time it with the tides. It becomes really, really challenging. Yeah. So some of our research priorities in our downtime, when we're not able to explore, has been putting together a survey and historical exploration database. We're almost done with that. We've prioritized places where the old survey may not be as good as it needs to be. And so we're going to update those places by resurveying it. Two places we're resurveying right now are Sullivan Sink, and we've just started back to Indian Springs, which is now called Sherlock Springs. And so we're resurveying that as well. And we're going to update those with that database with scientific observations throughout the years. So that's all coming along. We've also got some research going on, and I think one of the researchers that we collaborate with has got a graduate student that is going to look at something I did for my master's, which was looking at the influence of sea level changes through time, like hundreds and thousands of years, and how that has influenced where the caves have formed and at what depth they've formed, right? Because we know sea level has been moving over Earth's history, right? It's just not a brand new phenomenon. It's been happening as long as there's been water on the planet. And so that sea level has moved quite a bit. 25,000 years ago, 22,000 years ago, it was about 300 feet, 320 feet lower than it is today. Yeah, and so it's come up to where it is today in that past 22,000 years, right? But it's fluctuated over the course of 800,000 years. It's fluctuated between 20 to 30 feet higher than it is now to almost 400 feet lower than it is now. So those fluctuations over the span of 800,000 years seem to correlate with how much cave development we get at different depths. And so we're going to advance that now that we've got the cave survey database updated. We've now got that data that we can turn on some more research with the help of a graduate student. And we're also using some new technologies like photogrammetry, which you see in the bottom left, and then that thing that I showed you before that Casey had up in the top photo there, that has the ability to do side scan sonar within the cave. And so you can see a portion of the cave with that side scan sonar, and it makes mapping of that a bit easier, even though it's pretty hard to fly that machine when the cave gets smaller. So, you know, we've got 50 years of cave surveys that we've had to go through and edit and flag and parse and everything else, but it's there. We've improved the accuracy through geolocations and sinks. The GPS system is much better than it was even 20 years ago. We've been using the extensive cave radio locations, or CRLs, because they're quite important. So we've also been updating in this database. It's all geo-referenced. So at certain points, we can put comments in. You can click on that point, and up will come a photo, or up will come a video. So all those things are now almost online for us. And so those will be made available to some of the state agencies that we work with and some of the researchers, so that they can also utilize that information. Okay. Good story coming together. This is a place where we've got, and the photo's here on purpose. So this is the place called the Maxi Blow in upstream Sullivan. On the left, you see how that water's kind of brown, kind of stained a little bit. This is an infeeder of surface water that comes from a sinking stream that we can't find, but it shows up in the cave. To the right, it's a little bluer, a little cleaner. It's a groundwater source. They come together in certain areas. So, all the makings of a good story. Remember the premise? Yeah? So, we've got the Woodville Karst Plain. We've got Wakulla Springs. We've got the cave explorers as some of our characters. What's the motivating factor? Maybe it's human curiosity. Maybe it's preservation of the resource. Think we've got a plot? Divers overcoming exploration challenges, or scientists for better understanding of the driver of the healthy ecosystems, conservationists working with the resource managers to preserve and protect for future generations. Maybe we have a story here. Characters, is it the divers? Could it be the scientists? Could it be the naturalist? The conservationist? Yeah. How about our pros? Audience readers, usually smarter than people give them credit for. Yeah. Have you watched any reality TV? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we firmly believe that you can be presented with multiple perspectives and make up your own mind. Yeah. What's important, what's not. So what are the themes? Yeah. Exploration drives scientific inquiry. Clearly, you've seen that tonight. Yeah. If those divers hadn't gone in there, do you think those scientists would really be worried about stuff? That scientific understanding seems to drive some of that preservation and conservation. Yeah. What do you think? Do we have the makings of a good story? Yeah, I think we do too. So, this good story is coming. History of cave exploration, efforts by the divers, some of the technology, the impacts of the scientific understanding, the realization that the protection of this groundwater is vital to healthy ecosystems, and all the aquatic plants, the migrating birds, the full-time inhabitants of the area. Yeah. And underpinned by that latest connection we made. But you guys are also part of this story. Lots of people in this room that you may not know have participated in this story. So the story's coming. We've got a book and a documentary coming later this year that will hopefully give you an outline of kind of all the effort that's gone in over this through time. So thank you. I want to thank our sponsors and some of the people that have helped us over the years. Thanks to Friends of Wakulla, Wakulla Springs Alliance, Florida Park Service, Geologic Survey, Water Management District, National Forest, St. Mark's Refuge, and Florida Fish and Wildlife. Please check out our website and our Facebook page. And if you're interested in some online videos we've put together for the team, if you're interested in survey and mapping, it's on that YouTube thing. You can see some of the passages the guys have gone through to make that connection. That's up there as well as some trailers and teasers for the documentary that'll be coming. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. Who's got questions?
Or is it so are like each individual plane is running its own circulatory system, or are the planes connected and all together?
It was more of a figment of speech. But, you know, if you think about drainage basins, right, which are very easy in non-karst regions, right, because you can see the streams come into rivers and the rivers flowing to the ocean, right? In normal drainage basins, it's really easy. In karst drainage systems, it's hard because a lot of that flow is underground. And so that's what makes it, you know, a bit more challenging here to see it, because you don't realize you're on top of it. And so things that happen up here in the Red Hills, the Tallahassee Hills, they affect that water. That water eventually moves down towards the coast, but it goes through these karst plains to get there.
Is it connected to like say Florida, like all of that?
No, those are some a little bit separate. So the Woodville Karst Plain isn't in itself. Each of those like rivers has its own like kind of drainage basin, but they can overlap, and that's what makes it a little bit thing. So, you know, stuff along in Central Florida where you see some of the stuff along the Suwannee River or the Santa Fe, those springs are all fed. They've all got different drainage basins. So they wouldn't be connected necessarily to this, but within this area, everything is connected. Anybody else back there? No? Yeah, so yeah, sure. The question was about dye tracing and how do we actually do it and how do we look for it? Well, there's several different types of dye that we use, and they're very well known, and they're very well studied, and they don't really mix or decay very quickly, so we can find them. There's two different kind of methods you use. The first method is a qualitative, where you put in charcoal packs in the water at certain places, and then you dump the dye and make sure you get it with all your controls and, you know, everything else. And then you analyze that pack, and so then you know where if the dye came there or not. right? And so that's why when we did the trace for Chip's Hole to Turner Sink, we put in 15 packs because we didn't know where it was going to come in, but it only came in 2. So it can't be, the dye couldn't have come in upstream of those 2 packs, right? So we actually didn't have to go look for it, but we had to go look for the passage of where it could have come in, if that makes sense. The other way to do it is quantitative. It's a little bit more involved and a little bit more expensive. And there we would have auto samplers. So these samplers that would take samples like once every 3 hours. And they would collect these, and the technician would go bring those back, water samples back, and would look for dye signatures in those samples, right? At the certain frequency of which that dye fluoresced, right? And then we would determine there, we could determine a breakthrough curve, because you would see the concentrations go up as that big, slug of dye came by, given diffusion and dispersion effects, right? So you get these breakthrough curves, and so that's what they're called. And there you can tell a lot of quantitative information. And so all those dye traces that I showed you up on that, with the green lines and everything, those were all done quantitatively. So we knew the velocity, we knew, when we put it in, when we got it. So we knew velocities, flow velocities, we knew magnitudes, we knew proportions, because we could calculate the area under the curve. So if we only got 60% of the dye, right, we knew the other 40% was going somewhere else, right? So really, really useful information. It's worth spending the money if you're going to do it right. Yeah, but we're explorers, right? So we wanted to explore, and we wanted to find that connection. Does that answer your question? Yep. In the back? Yeah. You could probably contact one of us, and we could get that name of it and the information that we recorded about it. We could find that, yeah. So if you want to send me an email later or something, you can do that. Okay. Yes, that's the feral track. Yeah, that's where Turner Sink is. Yeah, yeah.
People wondering about your funding. Where are you getting all your funding?
Yeah, we're 100% self-funded, guys. So we get sponsorships, like a dry suit company will give us discounted dry suits or something, but we're all self-funded. So every single volunteer has their own equipment, pays for it, pays for the outings, hotels, travel. We're all self-funded, right? But we do it for the benefit of the citizens of the state of Florida. Yeah.
Late 80s, early 90s, present day, approximately what is the bottom time for the divers doing the exploration back in the day versus today?
Yeah, so back in the day, those guys were probably doing anywhere from 30 minutes of bottom time to maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And then decompression, depending on how deep you were for how long, would usually be at 150 feet, whatever your bottom time is, it's roughly what your decompression is going to be. When you go to Wakulla and the deeper caves that are closer to 300 feet deep, every minute that you put in a bottom time is 5 minutes of decompression. And so typically when we go explore now, because the extent of the exploration is where it is, we have to travel farther from the sinks to get there. So now that travel time, the time to explore, come back, we're usually doing bottom times anywhere from 4 to 7 hours, and then decompression for how many hours is needed, which is usually a lot.
10 hours, 20 hours?
Yeah, I mean, when the guys made the connection from Turner Sink to Wakulla, the total time that total bottom time was 7 hours, and the decompression added up, it was almost 30 hours of time underwater. Yes.
I'm curious about the crayfish die-offs and carbons. Do you guys do anything about like any type of research in saltwater intrusion?
We haven't really done that. We've taken observations about that. We've seen some of that in some of the, let's call it brackish caves that are closer to the Gulf of Mexico. We see part of that in Shepherd Spring. There's an area of the cave that just don't seem to have any type of biological activity. But then there's other areas that seem to be doing fairly well. We had worked with a FSU researcher here in the late 90s or early 2000s, and she was interested in sequencing the DNA of the crayfish, those albino crayfish. But I don't know where that research went or if she's still around or whatnot. But we've made notations of life that we see. So, we're always kind of taking notes and things if we see something, and so we note it down, and then that'll be added to that database. Yeah, it is. It's super boring. It's super boring. I mean, you just got to stay, so the way the decompression works is, you come back from your dive, and usually, we've got a bottom mix, right, which has a lower percentage of oxygen because oxygen becomes toxic too deep. It's got a really low fraction of nitrogen because nitrogen's narcotic at depth. And so we balance out the helium. But as you get back to decompression, we've got special decompression tanks with fixed mixtures of gas in it. So we usually increase the oxygen a little bit up to what's tolerable for us. And that's, kind of 0.6 to 1.6 partial pressure. So depending on what depth you're at, that'll change. And then we, come up every 10 feet and we'll have a stop there that's on our table. So if you've ever done open water diving, you learned about, hey, I can go, in your introductory class, hey, it used to be, I don't know what it is now, but when I started diving 30 some years ago, it was 60 feet for 60 minutes. I could stay 60 feet for 60 minutes with no decompression obligation, right? But when you go deeper than that, your decompression obligation comes in. And so, we change different mixtures. So at 190 feet, we've got a decompression mixture. At 120 feet, we've got a different decompression mixture. And then we switch those gases. So, it's nothing that we have on our back. We just have a stage bottle with a regulator, or we plug it into our rebreather. So we do. I mean, usually at 30 feet, it's nice to get your head out of the water, take your mask off, take your hood off, eat something. I mean, you have to hydrate and eat, and that's really hard to do underwater unless you have some kind of little chamber, right? And so we since it's all self-funded, we do it the old-fashioned way. We take a cattle trough and we turn it upside down and fill it with air, right? It's nothing glorious. It's really boring. Some guys bring paperback books so you can read that, kind of pass the time and whatnot. But it's the most boring part of the dive, but it's necessary.
Technology has changed everything.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest improvement or the biggest game changer?
Yeah, I think it's been the rebreather. So a lot of people talk about rebreathers, but they talk about closed circuit rebreathers, which are rebreathers that recycle everything, right? And so You've got electronics in it that add a certain amount of oxygen with whatever the diluent gas is, some kind of helium mixture, right? But we don't use those because we don't find them to be that reliable. And if you looked at statistics, closed circuit rebreathers are about, they have about 10 times the number of accidents or fatalities than regular open circuit scuba. We like reliable, right? So we use what's called a semi-closed circuit rebreather, which basically you take gas and you plug it into the machine, and whatever's in that mixture is kind of what you're breathing. So they're fully manual and they're only operated by your respiratory system, right? So, you know, you breathe in, you're breathing in the gas, you'll have a little bit of partial pressure drop of the oxygen that you've got to worry about. But essentially, you know, you're breathing what you've plugged in. And so if you want to change gases, you change to a different gas, right? So some people don't like that. They think it's too cumbersome. For us, it's all about the reliability. Yeah, because that's the most important thing is being safe down there, because that's a very unforgiving environment. Yes, ma'am.
Silly question, but how many sinkholes that have been explored in Florida? There are millions of them.
Yeah, I would say several hundred have been explored. Sometimes there's nothing in the bottom or we can't get through. But let me tell you this, that sinkhole wouldn't have formed unless there was some kind of void space below it, right? I mean, rock doesn't fall into rock. That will never happen, okay? The only way that sinkhole forms if there's some kind of cavity or void space in the rock, and it's all over the place. That's why there's so many sinks, thousands. There's thousands in Wakulla County.
How many have, how many open caves have you discovered in our open caves?
There are 3 that we know of in the Woodville Karst Plain. Yeah, so there's like little cavern that you can go inside and it's dry. There's water, but you can stand up inside it. One is Cully's Cave, which is on that loop at the Leon Sinks Geologic site. Another one is close to Chip's Hole. It's called Cowles Cave. It's dry. At one point in it was the scene of a murder investigation because they found bodies there. And the third one is a place over near Woodville called Natural Wells. And so Natural Wells is this little like grotto cavern that you used to walk down. A nice man owned it. He had let us explore it or whatnot, but it didn't really go anywhere. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's not many. There's only 3 that we know of. Yeah. Yes, sir. I have not been. I have not. Yeah. We've heard about some of the stuff down there. Obviously, there's way more than we can look at, right? So, but you know, if you know of some stuff that looks really interesting, give us a call. We'll be happy to check it out. Yes, sir. We asked permission before we got on their property, obviously. Yeah, so. A lot of people don't believe it until we usually show them some video of it and tell them that, oh, by the way, you know, part of your house is over this. The good news is it's 60 feet deep, right? So probably nothing for them to worry about, but yeah, we always ask permission. Yeah. Yes, sir. All right.
Wow, system, like, I mean, as in the closest to the surface of the groundwater where it would be, you know what I mean?
We have, well, I have serviced in upstream Big Dismal. Well, it's downstream, but it's this upstream passage off the downstream. There is an enclosed cavern that I've almost surfaced in. So we could see our bubbles hitting a free surface of water. And when we put our lights up there, we could see that it was just completely, so, you know, it's above the water table, basically. Yeah.
Two big wells, you guys see any? Or
I have not seen any. The only one I've seen is the one in over along the Swanee. I forget what the name of the cave is, where you can see the well. Little River, yeah, thank you. That's the only one I see. But we did help to locate the 3 wells that went into Wakulla for those instruments that you saw in that video. The guy was pulling down the tubing and the connections, and those went to the instruments that we put in there for the scientists. Yeah.
I have a well system, so I'm always thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, any others? Okay, one more.
I don't think people understood that the sewage in Tallahassee has always been going to Gulf Springs.
Yeah,
Through the plant on Slough or Springfield.
yeah.
It is the population growth.
Yeah, I mean, well, they used to. They don't do it anymore, right? That was one of the changes they made. We actually know the guy that's running that operation down there now, and they're doing their darndest, right? But the system's under siege because of the population growth. And Wakulla County is having the same kind of issues. They've got a lot of people on septic, right? And they need the tax revenue to build out the infrastructure, and those things aren't cheap. I mean, it's boring. Nobody wants to talk about sewage, but you got to talk about it, right? I mean, it's a byproduct of us, right? We've got to take better care. I mean, one of the things I think that's really disappointing for me is if you guys have ever walked along Munson Slough, there's a whole bunch of trails and parks along Munson Slough through southern Tallahassee. There is litter and garbage everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. That's going into the cave system. And you know where the cave system goes, right? I mean, you know, we should be doing something about that, right? I mean, back in the day when they first put that sewage treatment plant in, right, they were actually spraying right there. They had a field there that they were spraying right next to the airport runway. Right, and they've since stopped that, and they've since stopped putting the sludge over there as well, right? Because it just leaches out and everything. So, I mean, they're doing things, but you know, you guys need to bring that up to the county commission, to the city of Tallahassee, stuff like that, because there's a lot of stuff, and you know, plus the development. You know, everybody's putting in these retention ponds. Okay, that's not a bad thing. But there's a lot of diversion that goes on because of the way that they build the roads and things like that. And so those natural drainage patterns get altered. And, you know, you just recently you've had flooding around here because of that downpour about 2 weeks ago, right? Well, part of the reason you get that is because a lot of the small ponds and everything have now like drainage controls on them, right? And that's great for developers and people who want to move here because that's made now a lot of land accessible to development. Prior to that, it wouldn't have been because it would have been too swampy, right? But that natural swamp area is what allows that runoff to happen. And by putting in those mitigations, you're now blocking the natural way that that precipitation would get into the ground. Right. And so those alterations all have consequences, right? So you've got to think about that, right? Look at some of the things that divert into Munson Slough, all up on the Cascade Lakes. I mean, when that was first built out, those neighborhoods, all that drainage from all that street runoff goes straight into the upper end of Munson Slough there, Lake Bradford and down. And you'd only know that if you were somebody like me who studied here and saw it back in the day, or read up on how that developed over time, right? Every large metropolitan area in Florida is battling the same type of issues, right? If you guys don't bring it up, it just won't get addressed, right? I mean, luckily here you've got, you know, with a little pushing and shoving and a little loud yelling, right? You made a really big difference. That's why I say you guys are part of the story, right? Because if you weren't doing that, we wouldn't have these natural places to go. Yes, ma'am.
They act, in just poles, as opposed to when measure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people have known about that cave for 40 years. In fact, I met one of the guys who was one of the first ones to dive it just a week ago in Ocala. Right? So I've known about it. It's been on that St. Joe property. That St. Joe property's been sitting there for 40 years. Right? Yeah. Okay. Is that all the questions? Did I see one in the back? No. All right.